What's up gamers, my name is Fox and welcome to my basic combat beginner guide, in which I'm going to cover everything you need to know about the combat in Final Fantasy XIV. This video covers many different topics, so make sure to check the timestamps in the description below if you're looking for a specific part. Here is everything we will be covering in this video. We're going to start with the basics, of course. What are weapon skills and abilities? How are they different from each other? Then we're going to have a look at how to combine both of them, so that we can then look at the flow of combat. We have to also have a look at what clipping means and what it does. Then we're going to have a look at positionals for melee users and cast times for casters, of course. And lastly, we're going to have a look at the area of effect skills that you use for multiple targets. So, as just mentioned, let's have a look at the basic skills. We need to distinguish first between two different types of skills: weapon skills and abilities. Weapon skills, or spells in case of a caster, have the unique trait that they all share a cooldown. This is why we refer to them as global cooldowns, or GCDs in short. This means you can only activate one of them every time their cast time has run out. Most of the time global cooldowns follow a combo pattern, which means you follow a certain order in which you will activate your global cooldowns. Your goal is to never stop your GCD. You always want to keep it running, as you're just missing out on damage if it stops. Certain global cooldowns come with an additional cooldown that is specific to them, yet they're also part of the global cooldown. This means you can only use them once their internal cooldown has worn off. Moving on to our second type of skills, which are called abilities. Abilities, unlike weapon skills, do not share a global cooldown. They have their own cooldowns and are therefore either called cooldowns or off-global cooldowns. In short, OGCDs. This means you will always have to wait until their cooldown has worn off before you can reuse them. Fortunately, as mentioned earlier, they are not part of the global cooldown system, which means our goal is to combine both types of skills to create our standard flow of combat. To combine them, we first have to keep our global cooldown rolling. As you might notice, it takes usually around 2.4 to 2.5 seconds in most cases for our global cooldown to be available again. That is the exact time frame in which we want to use an ability or a so-called off-global cooldown. Usually we refer to this as weaving. So, our goal is to weave in one or two OGCDs in between our GCDs. Keep in mind that weaving two OGCDs is impossible for certain classes or depending on the skills that you're trying to weave. Let's have a look at it in action. First, I'm just going to use my GCDs. As you can see, you want your GCD to keep rolling at all times. This also applies when weaving in OGCDs. Now an example of using one OGCD in between my GCDs. And once you master the combat flow of Final Fantasy XIV, it will look like the last example, where we are alternating in between single weaves and so-called double weaves, where we are using two off-global cooldowns. Keep in mind, some classes cannot double weave at all, and some skills have too long of an animation lock to allow you to double weave them. In case your internet connection is not great or your ping is very high, you might have occurrences of clipping. Clipping means that the usage of an OGCD caused your GCD to stop rolling. This is due to the delay caused by your connection of the animation lock of your off-global cooldown. This means that if you're using your OGCDs too late, double weaving is nearly impossible without clipping. For some classes, this is already the case when single weaving. Your goal is to avoid clipping at all costs and gauge how much double weaving you can do with your internet connection and depending on the class you're playing. Keep in mind that global cooldowns that have a cast time usually don't ever allow you to double weave. Most of them allow you to single weave, with some exceptions where you cannot weave any OGCDs in between your global cooldowns without causing you to clip horribly. Melee DPS classes in Final Fantasy XIV have something we refer to as positionals. This means that if you hit a certain part of the enemy while executing a specific skill, you will deal more damage. Some skills like Wheeling Thrust, which is part of the Dragoon's kit, get a buff when executed from the rear. The rear of your target is very easy to identify, as it is the only part of the target that is open and has no part of the target circle covering it. Other skills, such as Fang and Claw, do get a buff when executed from the flank. The flank is also easy to identify on the target circle, as it is simply the part in between the side arrows and the open back. Optimally, you want to hit all of your positionals at all times to increase your overall damage output. In case you are unable to hit your positionals due to various reasons, you can use the ability called True North, allowing you to still get the positional buff for your skills even though you're not executing the positional requirement. As you probably already know, some classes like the healers and casters have to deal with casting when using global cooldowns. Other classes like Samurai, Reaper and Paladin also have certain skills that have cast times. When it comes to casting a spell, you need to simply put stand still for the duration that is required to finish casting your spell. Yet I will instantly tell you that you're able to move already long before the end of the cast bar has been reached. As you can see, I am moving my character already long before I have finished my cast. This is called Slidecasting. This is executed by simply moving before you reach the end of the cast bar. In order to help you learn when you can safely start moving again without interrupting your cast, you can put an emote onto your hotbar, which will light up bright again once the animation for your cast is finished and you can safely move again. As mentioned earlier, when executing casts, it is a lot harder to weave. Keep in mind that some classes like Black Mage are unable to weave in any OGCDs unless they use tools to get access to instant casts. If you ever cannot wait for a cast, you can use Swift Cast to skip the cast time. Now you know all the basics of the combat system for Final Fantasy XIV, so make sure to use everything you learned already in this video to your advantage in combat. Your final result should look like it does currently in the video. So if you're not there yet, practice makes perfect. Before sending you off, I want to talk about area of effect skills that you should be using during your dungeon runs. Some skills have lower potency than others when executed on a single target, but they make up for it when used on multiple targets due to them being an area of effect, in short AoE skill. Most of these AoE skills follow a simple rule that if you're facing 3 or more enemies, you're going to be doing more damage using those AoE skills instead of using your single target rotation. Most classes have a small combo of 2 or 3 GCDs they should be using on multiple mobs instead of using their standard rotation. So make sure to read the tooltips of all of your skills so that you can deal more damage in dungeons when facing multiple enemies. That would be all for today's video. Thank you a lot for watching until the end. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and you can subscribe for more Final Fantasy XIV guides and content. My name is Fox, I also stream on Twitch, and you can find me on Twitter too. Wishing you an amazing rest of your day, wherever you live.